Meister. Yeah.
And please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I may, please start.
Your comments from the audience. So do you want to, so you're,
Yeah.
yes, so go ahead and first introduce yourself.
Okay. Do I have to do something or is it on?
I believe it's on.
Okay, my name is Dan Brown. I live over on DORADO Avenue, and I'm a 48-year resident of South Lake Tahoe. I gave you an overview of a very comprehensive study that was done with regard to over-tourism and how it affects infrastructure. Like I said, this is only an overview, and it was done through Cornell University Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise and the Eckler Woods Foundation. So it was a comprehensive study done over quite a number of years. I live in a small house. I have 3/4 of a bathroom, and the amount of water I use as compared to the vacation home rental next to me that had 16 people in it over this past snow globe, right, is demonstrably different. And that's the way it is all over town. We are only 20% of the problem here in South Lake Tahoe. 80% that gobbles up most of the infrastructure, right, and adds to a bigger part of the problem is tourism and over-tourism. And some of these vacation home rentals, you know, they can put 30 people in it. Well, how many showers a day do 30 people take? How much water do they use as far as drinking water and also flushing toilets? Now, granted, this board has been historically, and I mean historically for all the years I've been here, and Jim knows, you guys have been reluctant to charge a fee to repair a problem that exists today, and you know how much water you're losing through leaks and bad infrastructure. Now, when this system gets overused, right, how much is that going to get worse, right? And, you know, when, you know, do we have geysers forming all over town as a result of bad infrastructure? In a situation like this, we need to start charging surcharges for the people, like in these vacation home rentals, and I'm part of the Tahoe Neighborhoods group, that use the infrastructure a whole lot more than residents do. Like I said, we're 20% of the problem, they're 80% of the problem. And unless that's addressed, there's not going to be enough money to fix some of the problems that this board already knows that exists. Thank you very much.
Anybody want to comment?
I was just going to say, when we first addressed the 218 process, looking at some financing mechanisms like you're proposing was something I thought about a lot. Unfortunately, the legal realities of the 218 process were daunting in reality. So over John could kind of shed some light on that.
Yeah, I was going to kind of talk to that a little bit. We went through that Prop 218 rate setting process, which is governed by state law. We worked with our rate consultant to look at our rate structure. And actually the issue of vacation home rentals came up. We wanted to make sure that they're paying their fair share. So based on that, on our work with that rate consultant, we believe that probably a couple things, that they are paying their fair share, and that in fact we can't justify charging them anymore based on the state law that governs that process. So I think that's probably my main point, but I'd definitely like to take a look at it that will be presented to us. We are concerned about, when we have these peak periods, especially let's talk about the water system, it causes our system to flex a lot. So yeah, when we have these peak days, it does drive more leaks and more challenges on our sewer collection and treatment and disposal side. So we understand where you're coming from. It is a concern for the board. We have looked at this as part of the rate setting process. And looking forward, I think we'll continue to look at this issue and see what we can do to protect, especially our local ratepayers.
Well, as a local ratepayer, right, how much more is a VHR paying per 1,000 gallons of treated water than I am? Or are they paying the same rate? See? So therefore, that place is using 5 to 10 times more water, right, than I would use in any given week, no less day. And they're paying the same rate for that treated water as I am. Now, there's a fairness doctrine, built into just that statement. If somebody is using the system 10 times more than I am, both for sewer and water, but I'm paying the same rate, that's, where's the fairness doctrine in regard to that? And why aren't they paying a surcharge? If you don't want to raise the rate, at least institute a surcharge that would address that unfairness within the system.
They kind of are in a fair way, because we have a second tier, and so once a heavy user goes above that first tier, they go into the second tier, and the second tier is a lot more expensive than the first tier for the water use.
They usually don't exceed that first tier, except in the summertime when they do a lot of irrigating.
Well, it could be. The example that he provided, if there's 15, 16 people in a house, they can definitely exceed that first tier.
But they're not there, that's full-time, so.
Sure.
They're only there 2 to 3 days on any given occasion. And so for that 2 or 3 days, the amount of taxation, the way they're taxing the system for those 2 or 3 days is completely different than if it was just the 20% of us that are locals as compared to the 80% that's not. You see what I'm saying? You know as well as I do, there's 22 to 25,000 full-time residents in this community. How many more people were here for 3 days over snow globe, over 4th of July weekend, over Christmas and New Year's? It's just, this town can swell to 125,000 people, in a heartbeat. And, that's putting a very heavy burden on your system. And so what I'm saying is there needs to be, right? Forget the rate increase. Let's leave the rate increase out of this. There needs to be a surcharge so that you have, if you collect this surcharge, you have a pool of money you can draw from when problems arise with regard to how much taxation is being put on the system on any given day. Right?
Yeah, Dan, here's a thought. We'll take a look at what you gave us today. I think we'll talk to Yuri and our rate consultant and just make sure we've addressed, your issues and get back to you. Because the water and the sewer kind of responses are a little different. Your sewer bill is based on essentially the number of bathrooms that you have. So if someplace has 6 bathrooms versus 1 bathroom, you're going to be paying about 6 times.
But that's not the crux of the problem. It's how many times are those 6 bathrooms being used when there's 20 people in a house? You know, and how many times is that, those 6 showers being used, you know? if
Yeah,
there's
how
20
full is,
you
how
know,
full are those structures?
Right, so it's not the number, it's the use. And the use depends on how the system, your system is being taxed as far
At
as,
these peak days.
yeah. And so, you know, if geysers start popping up all over town because, you know, the infrastructure needs to be replaced, right? We've talked about this 100-year replacement for all the years I've been up here, right? And how much of that infrastructure has been replaced in the 48 years that I've been here? Not 48% of it. I can guarantee that.
Oh, for sure.
So therefore, we're in a situation where you need to do infrastructure repair and replacement, right? And there's not an awful lot of money there to do it. So we need to go to the sources where we can get the money to do what needs to be done, so that on any given taxing weekend, right, we don't have problems.
All right. And you know, from when I first got on the board, we had a problem trying to define how much people should pay, and that's when we developed the sewer units. And we've gone back and forth and could never come up with anything better than that, short of putting a meter on every effluent. You know, you got water coming in, you got water going out. Or counting the number of warm pillows was the term that we used to use. You know, and it's just difficult. If you've got a system, and I know we got a lot of data that we could probably use to put together, but we also got to go by the laws that the state's come up with on.
But you have the best data of any organization in this community, and you read it on a regular basis. Those are the meters that you guys have put in all over town. And so you know how much water I use, right? And you know how much water is being used right next door to me, right? And so therefore, there's a calculation there that's just not accurate.
We can almost do that by the day, can't we? Or the break
Do
it
it by the minute.
Yeah, by the minute, we got meters.
So I'm saying you guys have the best barometer in this community with regard to over-tourism and how your particular system is being taxed minute by minute, day by day, right? And so therefore, I know there's a rate consultant, right? That's a whole different story. I'm not talking about his job, right? I'm talking about there should be a way to put a fee on these businesses, so-called businesses, they don't tax them like that, but these businesses that are operating that are taxing your system as well as mine. What happens when, you know, the pipe blows up in my neighborhood as a result of overuse, right? Now I have no water until you fix it. And there's a cost involved in that. And that cost is generally a whole lot higher, exponentially higher, than the 100-year plan to repair and replace. And so are we going to do that, you know, one Band-Aid at a time? Or are we going to put a fee structure in place to you know, have a pool to choose from, right? That would, you know, actually replace problems as they arise and hopefully replace, you know, an aging system.
In our,
I'm sorry if I'm taking up any of your time.
We're going to
5 minutes,
Yeah.
but maybe I could close with this, is that we'll get in touch with you, we'll look into your issues. I believe our rate structures, we were very concerned about vacation home rentals and local rate payers as we developed our rate structure, which we have to do in compliance with state law. So, but let's look back into that, and we'll be back to you, and we can report back to the board as you like.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and there is a limit for the public comments.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to take up all your time, but, you know, this is something that's been,
Yeah, food for thought.
yeah.
Okay, do we have any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar? I'll second that. That passes for. Now I guess we have Mr. Clark.
Good afternoon. I'm asking for today is to purchase to buy another Bobcat utility type vehicle for the district operations. They're currently using the 2003 Kawasaki Mule, which has gotten to be very high maintenance. They got 17 years on it. It's got well over 3,500 hours. And I'd like to look at this as an upgrade. They didn't have this sort of thing back when we bought the Mule. It's more of a sport utility, and it's a light sort of vehicle. These Bobcats, after the purchase of the last one we bought, the first one, it's proved its worth many times in different situations we've had to use it on. As far as operations, the use of their use of it would be primarily work around the plant, to move pumps around. The snow blower, they can do their snow blowing much more efficient than the small walk behinds. And plus all the work that continues to grow up our 60 mil pond. You could use it up there with several different attachments. So it's quite a bit more than a regular sport utility, but I think we'll get way more use out of it. It'd be more of another tool for the district to have, whether it is operations or we need to have another one somewhere else. Give us two capable units that we can rely on.
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
What was the cost of the standard rec version we referenced earlier?
The standard cost for that through the bid site is $66,000.
So what are we getting with the additional $50,000?
It's the snow blower's $8,700. Snow blower.
So $7,000 more.
And then taxes and everything, it came out to 81.
And then also, were the kind of equivalent electrical versions researched as well? Do you have any costs for those?
The only electrical one that I'm aware of, Polaris has introduced one. And as of right now, it's getting approximately 50 miles to a charge. And it's still fairly new. The thing with the Toolcat, which makes it so versatile, is a hydraulic system on it. We can plug in all sorts of attachments as needed.
What's your range currently, daily range with the Toolcat? I mean, 50 miles seems like a lot.
We're around here, it'd be fun. I plan, you know, but
Well, I thought the use was for at the plant.
plant and 60 mil pond and out in outlying areas. There's another tool for it. But there isn't, the problem with the electric ones is in order to run the hydraulic pump, you need an awfully large motor because they're hydrostatic drive. And plus any attachments that we put on it that require the flow of a hydraulic system.
So in other words, it wouldn't run a snow blower without it.
So they're renting one that doesn't run snow blowing.
Polaris has got one, and it's more of a sports utility, side by side.
What's the cost of that?
I'm not sure on that. It's, like I said, this relatively new within the last year that come out. And there's more and more that are coming out.
Well, I mean, that's kind of goes to where I'm going with
Yes.
this questioning, is that, you know, with a substantial, investment of $81,000, we know currently the direction the state of California is going as it relates to mandating GHG reductions, the cultural ethic of this community. And so I have a hard time, without a full kind of barrage of detail, specifically why the electrical will not work. The staff report as presented to me does not give that to me. So I'm not questioning you, I don't mean to imply that. But what I'm saying to you is, it's hard for me to make a vote like that, putting us into a long-term investment of 17 years plus conceivably,
Hopefully more.
hopefully, of using resources that we know will become a liability the further we get away from today.
Yes.
And so without that additional research, I mean, I would love to come back, put this on hold, take a look at what electrical options, and if it doesn't exist or it doesn't work, great, but we started to have this conversation, started to have the culture in which we can begin these conversations.
Yep.
And then look to kind of include the future staff reports, look to include that option as well, so that way we can just go forward.
Yeah, not a problem with that. I do stay up on electric vehicle options and such like that. But again, our issue with a lot of our vehicles that we use, our larger vehicles, are running pieces of equipment which require a lot of power.
No, I don't doubt that. And I don't even imply anything by that. But again, with the information I have as we look forward to this meeting, I didn't have the information
Oh, okay.
that would allow for that.
Did you contact them?
Not with the holiday, no. Out of respect for, all various people's time. But, I've had conversations with staff members in the past about including this information, still yet to ever be included. And so, taking upon myself here at the meeting to, I guess, have this conversation. So that way,
Yes.
ideally, like I said, I'd love to put this on hold until we can have that information. I can review it, and it's, personally, not to be hypocritical in all things I do, can have that information and make an educated vote.
I've always been reluctant to buy something with new technology that's first year. And I'm not sure that in a year we have enough data long term. I mean, we're in Metropolitan Water or some other big one where they can experiment with
Yes.
things, but we're small, we only need one, and let's make sure we get what we really need.
Yes. And all it's,
What I would say again, the maintenance for electric's better. The lifetime cost of electric is non-existent, and so we can all make assumptions. Again, I don't want to make assumptions. I want to be based on factual information that I don't have.
yes.
So your feelings about how things work after a year, we could speak to the relevance of that. I would say it's irrelevant, but the point being, right now I don't have the information.
Well, and the fact that I'm going to run some of those, with the blower and a few other things.
Yeah.
But right now, it's not going to work.
Yeah, we just like to have that part of the package to look at those alternatives. Is there-
No, I know, but again,
So I get your request, yeah, I get your
right, no,
request.
but we've had this conversation multiple times, and we're still sitting here today.
I'll be glad to sit down at any point,
So Nick, so what you're saying is.
talk to you about it.
Well, this item, but then
Well,
also
again-
also in the future, is what you're saying is you want,
And maybe
if there's an electrical component, you want that.
At least vetted, at least some discussion of it, because right now, we are going to be, whether we think it or not, we will be forced to come into compliance with state law, for better or worse. I mean, this is not coming from me. And so to lock and start, and this Bobcat may not be the perfect example, and certainly it's not actually, but the idea that we're locking ourselves into something that we know we'll have to address at some point, without any review that we can look in a staff report as to other options, it doesn't seem like we're doing our due diligence to make the best decision, knowing the political and regulatory compliance realities on faces in 5, 10, and 20 years. Is all I'm saying. And so I'd love that information to be available in staff reports, because you look at this and you're like, hey, Nick, it doesn't run the systems we need, it's twice as much. Whatever the variables at play are, you're like, cool. there's no issue at that point. But unless you have that information, you know, it leaves me uncertain, because I'm not an expert in these matters, like Strasher would never claim to be. And it leaves anyone else in the public that might want to take a look at this with the same questions. And really, I'd love to be able to address those issues, ensure that we've vetted everything properly. And so,
I respect Nate's passion for being a little more environmentally sensitive, but does it relieve the responsibility for the piece of equipment that you need to get the job done around the way? Will it? No, not in a year, maybe not in 5 years. I mean, when there's a viable option and we have two choices, then I think maybe we can make that choice. You know, and you and Nick can sit down together and you can discuss what options are available in electric equipment, from a tool cat up to a 18-wheeler. You know, I mean, for all I care, at this point, you need
I
the piece
don't,
of
I
equipment to
don't
get the job done.
object to any of that, and I do attempt to stay up as best as I can with achieving technology. You know, they're coming out with pickups now, which I'm excited about. Maybe they'll start having some smaller, affordable ones. Ford in 2021 is supposed to launch their new electric pickup. Yeah, there's so many places in the district something like that will be used.
right, and so, and I guess this is more broad than just the specific item. Because again, I don't have any great knowledge of bobcats or large snow blowers. Although I hope you get a lot of snow and you can use it a lot. But it's more that if the information isn't provided, I can't make the assumption that it's been considered, and I don't know the variables in which it's not going to work. Because even right now, I've been informed of things, but reading this, you wouldn't have known that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's why I asked, so,
It's
you know, we're talking, you know, this is what brought it up, but what I'm asking is in the future, do you want, when something like this comes up, do you want it just always addressed?
Well, I'd love to see it always addressed, because then we wouldn't have this conversation, and also it would be apparent to me, it'd be apparent to the community, everyone on board, and then at that point, once we get all the information out, then, you know, it's smooth sailing, Renee would argue that.
And I guess my second question is, are you making a formal request that we put this specific purchase on hold?
No, I say we make a motion, and if Nick doesn't like it, he can vote against it. I mean, that's the simplest way to get that, and 2 or 3 of us don't like it, that's the way it goes.
Just listening to the conversations, and desire to have certain things included when the district's purchasing whatever. My suggestion would be is to maybe for staff to take a look at what Nick has brought up, plus other things that may be important to other board members as well, and put that so the board comes to a consensus. What are the important things when the district is purchasing a piece of, as an example, a piece of equipment? Is it the environmental side with electrical? Is it something compatibility or something else? And come to some agreement as to the criteria that staff knows they have to research and bring to the board as a whole, not just one board member wants one thing and another board member wants one thing. I think the board needs, my suggestion is the board should come to some consensus and give direction to staff so they know what to bring to you that meets the criteria of the board.
I personally don't have a problem with that, you know, the more information, the better.
I mean, like most of it is readily available, you know, so I wouldn't even looking at it, I talked this in an office meeting probably close to a year ago now, and most of it's readily available, and so it's not like you're asking for a lot of staff time. But again, I think it, you know, we've seen kind of from a community ethic what's being desired, and as you see things now, you couldn't honestly say to people you've vetted those community concerns with the information provided. If you pulled this up online, that would not be the opinion people have.
Yeah, I do like to see a kind of formal evaluation as part of the agenda.
Right, I mean, and I don't want to burden staff with a lot of unnecessary things, you know, real straight, real simple, the greatest event, you know, fast and as easy as possible, just get the kind of the nuts and bolts information.
It should be looked into and reported on.
The question is there an equivalent piece of equipment that can do the job in an electric form?
No, sir.
not at this point that I heard.
Okay, I mean, that answers the question, the simple question.
But this is a good conversation, and I like what Gary was saying, that in the future, if it would help everybody to answer questions out in the public, staff is all for that. We just needed a little direction on where you want to go. So regardless if you put it on hold today or you vote for it today, in the future, I'm understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd like us to do all different avenues when it comes to the electrical part of vehicles.
Right, and I'm going to be voting yes today because you both are incredibly great men, and you say there's no other available product to take you at face value in your word. But I won't in good faith be able to vote yes again unless that information is.
And that's perfect, that's fine, but it just gives us a direction on which way to.
And if there was an equivalent piece of equipment that would do your job for you, that was electric, I would vote for that. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
And I would probably be bringing that for this board.
Right.
Right now, the hardest part is
Makes sense to me.
the hydraulic part of it. When you start running snow blowers, I'm not aware of anything that's electric that would, in that small of a frame setup, that would be able to handle hydraulics, because the hydraulics, you'd have, like he said, you'd have to have a certain type of motor where your 50-mile radius would probably be cut down right off the top substantially, depending on how much you used that hydraulic jackhammer. I went out here and used it for an hour or two. It may, suck out 25% of the life of the battery, things like that. But in the future, if you'd like us to come and cover all bases, we're all for it. All for it.
In that instance, I would withdraw my request.
Just one thought in regards to the board action. Nick, perhaps we could add a finding that EV vehicles were considered and found to be either non-existent or not practical for this application, and include that as part of the board action.
It's getting easier to where I can make a comparable and present you with two different options, electric or hybrid or a gas. I have been downsizing a lot of our vehicles in the fleet for several years now. I've been in this position. And with the advent of electrical vehicles, and the popularity and technology has come so far, and the prices are coming down, it is getting to that point where I can, truthfully come up with two different comparables for the electric and the gas powered.
And I guess really the point of my comments for them, comments of this particular board agenda item, were more of a vehicle to get to that place. And so, like you said, you guys are the experts. Take your face value, so not going to postpone it, going to be voting yes, but just.
Keep in mind also, I think it was mentioned before, correct me if I'm wrong, but the electric car that we purchased, one of the big concerns that a lot of people have who live up in the mountains are these electric cars in the snow, the ice, sitting outside in the temperatures. So that electric car was kind of a test pilot for us also to see how it's been doing. And so far, I haven't heard anything bad about
Electric
it.
drive much better in snow.
Do they?
Yeah, I can run.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weight. Well, no, but because for a lot, it's fun though.
Yeah. Like I said, that car sits outside 24/7, so
Right.
a lot of our equipment does sit outside 24/7. So it was kind of also a test too, to be able to stand up here and tell the board that, hey, electric may not be a bad way to go. We have one, we've had it for a couple of years through a couple storms, it sits out 24/7, and we haven't had any issues. So it's kind of a test for us too. So it's all, this electric thing is all a new direction. I know they've been out for years, but when you start doing it into utility vehicles that are used daily, we'll be glad to check into stuff like that.
No, I've seen, to Jim's point, there always is that reluctance for new things. I'm very, Mr. Sutton's point, very passionate about this, obviously, spent a lot of time in it, but things I'm not as familiar with, I do have that reluctance, so it's nothing to impugn anybody that also has that finally.
Sure. And our job as staff is to make sure you guys are all informed with every detail, everything you need for the people out in the public. And if you would like a little bit extra from us to make that happen, I don't think there's a different district staff member here that would argue with you.
Thank you so much.
But in the future, if that's what you'd like, now we've got a direction to go.
Thank you so much.
Would you like me to provide a revised board action? Two parts. First part, make a finding that an electrical vehicle was considered and found to be not applicable for this application. And number 2, approve the purchase of a 2019 Bobcat Toolcat, model 5600 with the Bobcat 63-inch snow blower, model SBX 240X72 through the Sourcewell Procurement Services, bid number 040319 to Bobcat Central Incorporated in the amount of $81,884.61.
I'll second
You actually did better than us. I got more often.
I got a couple X's there.
that. And that passes 4-0. So the amount for payment for claims wasn't available, so I'm going to do approval of payment of claims in the amount of $1,521,900.
Just trying
Can you do it, John? $1,521,978.36.
Second.
Standing for ad-hoc committee reports. Reports.
Merry Christmas and New Year's. Everyone should say.
El Dorado County Water Agency, I'm assuming we'll have a meeting next week. Yeah. And has to have been canceled. So that brings us to John's report.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. First of all, welcome to the new year and a new decade. So far, so good, I think. Talking to our staff, I think there's a genuine excitement and optimism out there. And I think we're really looking forward to 2020. Lots of great ideas in progress, getting started and coming forward. And I'm approaching my 1-year anniversary here as GM, coming up on January 10th. I've been working with Randy and Kelly on an improved review and goal-setting format. And I plan to have something for the entire board to chew on next week for review and comment. And then a comprehensive discussion at the next board meeting, closed session on January 16th. So on my report, starting with snow globe, and from what I see and hear or didn't hear, it looks to have been a successful event with fewer problems and noise complaints than in the past. We had all of the security and support we asked for here at the district. There were 7 security people assigned to our area, and just a handful of thwarted attempts to enter the property and sneak into the event. So no cows wandering our treatment plant this year as in years past, although we did see a herd walking down Black Bar during that time. We did work with the city, with Frank Rush, and the city council with our 2x2 ad hoc committee meetings with Chris and Randy, and that really worked out very well, and we appreciate this cooperation with the city. I do expect snow globe to be back here next year, unless tighter noise restrictions or other problems chase them off, so we'll see. Next is CWEA, the California Water Environment Association. So proud to announce that the district has received 3 awards this year from CWEA, the Sierra section. Plan of the Year, Supervisor of the Year, Phil Trella. He's a 34-year veteran of the district, and he's been holding down the night shift here for many years. And then Laboratory Analyst of the Year, Dolores Strebitich. She's been here 40 years, and she just received Employee of the Month. So it's been a good time for Dolores. And if you know Dolores, she's really such a joy to work with, so really fantastic. These will now move on to the state level for considerations. I really just want to extend our congratulations on these hard-earned inspirational accomplishments. And also want to recognize John Sheridan. He's one of our operators for all his work and leadership at CWEA and for the district. He is currently the Sierra Section President. And I have a couple things to add on my report, starting with a staffing update, just 5 updates today. But I'll be quick. In human resources, I think as you know, the changes going on there. Liz is our interim HR director for at least the next 6 months. And we are currently working with Liz to assess workload. And I expect we'll likely need some temporary assistance for Liz during Nancy's absence. Next, in underground repair sewer, this advertisement closed December 12th. We had 27 applicants. We'll be interviewing 6 next Wednesday. And a couple things in engineering. For project engineer, advertisements closed on December 19th. We received 5 applications. We're likely going to interview all 5 of these on January 23rd is what we're working on at this point. And then also in engineering, our limited term engineer, Tiffany Reyes, she has left for a permanent position at La Hontan. And so we have 2 years remaining on this limited term position. We're finding it's hard to fill these positions once vacated if there's only a year or 2 left. Anyway, we are currently advertising for a replacement through the end of this month for that position. And then
For just the remaining 2 years, or we can maybe go back and get a 5-year left period?
Well, I mean, currently there's 2 years left on the limited term. I'm talking with Julie, and customer service has a similar problem with their limited term meter tech position that was just vacated. So there's two years left on both these limited term positions. It's really getting hard to fill. The customer service position closes on January 6th. We'll see what we get there. But I mean, we are looking at potentially extending the term of those limited term positions. So when Tim gets back, we'll get with Julie and take a look at that and bring that forward.
Think about eliminating that position in favor of a project manager level engineer.
We had a part-time engineer that was eliminated. Yes. Yeah, a lot of different positions in engineering trying to, find this most cost-effective blend to get the work done. But that's also become very challenging. These limited term positions, the interns that come in and out, the part-time engineers that come in and out. So we're looking at options, Jim. Thanks for bringing that up. And we'll see what happens with these recruitments. We'll give you an update, perhaps bring something forward in regards to limited terms at the next board meeting or 2. And then just one last thing, you probably haven't seen in your email yet, but Sean and I have put together an opinion piece. You have an email. It's just sort of a year in review, and you might see this in local, print and email media. Thanks, Don.
So, I think next is Evo. We're not going to do this thing, so.
Yeah, Evo has been teasing the board with these PCD updates, so I'm glad you gave us some more detail.
Okay, good.
And Sean, I think you're planning on bringing the tank presentation back next board meeting, so Randy can join us.
Yeah, I got numbers yesterday. This is the fresh numbers.
Okay, well, first off,
Year, board members. The last time that I formally updated the board on this project was back in May of 2019, and as the completion date for this project is coming about in about 6 months, I thought that this was an appropriate time to provide you an update. So, without much further ado, I'll try to make this as short as possible. So for the staff report today, what I want to talk about is primarily the Southwest feasibility study and remedial alternatives. And if the time allows, then I'll give you a quick rundown on some of the findings from the regional pollution characterization that's been conducted out in the Southwest area by the AD-HOC Regional Water Quality Control Board. And if any questions come up during this presentation, please do not hesitate to raise them at that time. I don't want to make this too formal, so again, interruptions are welcome. So the Southwest feasibility study, this is a planning study, was performed to evaluate whether existing and/or new wells could be used to provide hydraulic control and removal of PCB from groundwater in the Southwest area. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that at the end of this process, we're going to have a recommended alternative. And that recommended alternative does not commit the district, does not commit the other affected water purveyors to move forward with the construction project. It also doesn't commit the state to fund whatever that recommended alternative may be. So I would just want to keep that in mind and keep that in context that, you know, when we're looking at these cost numbers and, you know, pulling the trigger on it, you know, we're going to have to make a decision for a recommended alternative as part of this planning process. That is the end point. But it doesn't commit the district, again, or the other parties to actually implement that project. So, you saw the slide in my last update in May of 2019. And at that time, we had 6 management scenarios that were on the table that were developed and were identified for initial evaluation. Those included a base alternative. We talked about in-situ treatment. We talked about using a large number of extraction mills, moving and siting new replacement water supply wells, and different options under targeted pumping. We used findings from the modeling evaluation and input from the water purveyors to screen those alternatives, and we ended up with 3 shortlisted alternatives that we'll talk about a little bit more in depth starting on the next slide. So over the past 6 months, what the project team has done is we focused on finding the infrastructure needs for those 3 shortlisted alternatives, and also to determine life cycle costs for each of the alternatives. So the 2 primary objectives for that will be used for evaluating these alternatives, what it boils down to is first effectiveness for PCB removal, and then secondly, cost. So here's a table showing those alternatives. And the names that we use for those alternatives are on the left-hand side. And so here's a summary in terms of operations, PCB treatment, and emergency water supply. In terms of emergency water supply, all of the alternatives will be backstopped by the district's water system. So we'll continue to provide water on an emergency basis in accordance with our existing mutual assistance agreements with Combo Keys and Lucas Brothers Water Company. In terms of operations, the base alternative is basically continuing with what is occurring now. so that the Tahoe Keys and Lincoln Brothers public water supply wells are operated to meet their average annual demands. And in terms of PCE treatment goes, it would continue to maintain the current levels of PCE treatment. So that's wellhead treatment at the Tahoe Keys Water Company number 2 well. And starting in 2021, recently in October, Lincoln Brothers was awarded the grant to put the wellhead treatment system on the Lincoln Brothers number 5 well. So starting in 2021, that would be another water supply well with wellhead treatment that would be providing some type of clean removal just through its regular operation.
Just a question, what other wells are they operating, or are they operating, are we providing, what portion of their water are we providing?
In terms of Lincoln Brothers?
Yeah, back up.
Yeah. Typically, it's, I want to say, maybe less than 10% of their total water use is backstopped through the intertie. They're using their number 1 well, Lincoln Brothers Water Company number 1, primarily as that's their only remaining source of water supply for that system. For Tahoe Keys is operating all 3 of their wells. As you know, the number 2 well has wellhead treatment on it, and number 1, there's no treatment on that well, but the levels of PCE, they're trace amounts and currently below drinking water standards. Under the second alternative, so again, alternative 1, think status quo, and everything will be used, that's kind of a point of reference for the 2 other alternatives. Under the targeted pumping, again, in terms of operations, what we're looking at is trying to maximize PCE mass removal. And so that would be where where most of the changes are in the operation of the Lincoln Brothers well, so they would be relying on the number 5 well. Again, a well that will have a wellhead treatment system starting in 2021. And in the targeted pumping scenario, we're also proposing a new replacement well and wellhead treatment system at Lincoln Brothers number 4 site. So Lincoln Brothers Water Company would be relying primarily on those 2 wells to provide water supply and to maximize PCE mass removal out of the contaminant. The last alternative, alternative number 3, is gradual conversion from a groundwater-based water system to surface water-based. And so that would be where the district would be taking a large role in this last alternative, attaining permits, negotiating agreements between the different water companies, completing design, construction, and testing of a 4.4 million gallon a day surface water treatment plant that would provide water to Tahoe Keys and Lincoln Brothers Water Company water systems, and the district basically acting as a wholesale water supplier to those 2 water companies. In the interim, what's assumed in the evaluation is that we allot ourselves 15 years to get that work completed. And over the next 15 years, then they would, Tahoe Keys and Lincoln Brothers would continue to operate as under the base treatment or current operations. Any questions?
So we would build this surface water system and then sell it to these and move
We would sell the water from that plant, correct.
it. So 4.4 million gallons per day would supply.
That would meet the maximum demand for both those systems. So you would be producing more water than those systems use on a regular day. but it would be sized, again, to meet worst-case scenario for those water systems. So, here are the costs, and what I did was I just highlighted in here, I think the most important items to draw your attention to. Again, alternative one is the base. There's no change in capital infrastructure, no change in operations and maintenance over the next 20 years. These are net present value costs for the capital of the O&M to 2019 dollars. And on the bottom is the time to implement timeframes for these different alternatives. Under the targeted pumping alternative, there are 3 options underneath that alternative that were also costed out by the project team. And that has to do with what do you use with that, or how do you use that treated water. As you may know or may not know, that in order to discharge this contaminated water into the district's sanitary sewer system, you have to treat that water to drinking water standards. Okay. You also have to treat the drinking water standards if you want to discharge to waste. If it goes either to the district system, and option 3 is sharing part of that discharge to waste to the City of South Lake Tahoe storm drain system. So all of those options, whether you're able to use it for probable reuse, which, providing it back to customers as drinking water, or option 2 or option 3, all require treatment to drinking water standards. So if you take a look at those 3 options within that alternative, actually being able to provide that for potable reuse has the lowest associated cost. The highest cost, if the water that's treated is discharged to waste to the district's sanitary sewer system. That's because we pay a lot of money in power fees and power costs to move that water from the basin and take it over to Alpine County. The lower cost for option 3 assumes that 50% of the time during the winter and the spring, during the wet time of the year, treated water would be discharged into the district sanitary sewer system, and then 50% of the time during the summer and fall, you can get discharges to the city's storm drain system. And here you see on the far right the costs for the conversion to surface water. Again, these are 20-year costs, and you're talking tens of millions of dollars for that alternative.
What could we anticipate getting annually from Brookings and the Keys under option 3?
You mean?
We're selling them water wholesale. What are they going to
Correct.
What's the fees we're going to get?
We will find out over the next 6 months. That's my last slide. Those are the issues on the horizon of what we need to resolve. So right now I can't tell you what those numbers are, but that's what we need. That's what will be the focus of discussions over the next 6 months.
Is there going to be a chance to get any of this reimbursed by the insurance company, or?
You mean as far as responsible parties go?
Yes. Or the insurance company for them, which?
I don't think that's within the realm of consideration right now. Maybe Gary will be able to enlighten me as to whether that's a possibility or not.
So these would be the maximum cost, and I think if we receive anything, we'll just
Correct.
for those costs.
Correct. These are just to give us ideas. Again, this is a planning level study as to how much money we're looking at. And these are level 4 planning cost estimates. So they're like range from -30% to +50% as far as what that actual number may be.
And we've been looking for state funding, of course, as well, especially for the
Yes.
students.
Yes. I mean, as far as, if you move forward with the implementation grant, we'll talk a little bit about that, but a large portion of the capital costs would be borne by the state, depending on who takes the lead with submitting that application. Okay, any more thoughts, questions? Okay, so there were costs. Again, the second big basket is PCB removal. The state, as far as, again, this is through a groundwater cleanup program, so they're very interested in wanting to fund a project that maximizes its return on PCB removal and groundwater cleanup. So if you take a look at the alternative one, if we just continue, okay, to operate the wells as are currently being operated, you can see the amount of PCB that would be removed. Depending on on the model, if you use best case assumptions versus worst case, you'd be removing anywhere between 300 to close to 1,800 pounds of PCB over the next 20 years. For the targeted pumping alternative, all three of those alternatives would be removing the same amount of contaminant mass. And again, the difference is just on the discharge end. What are you going to do with that water once it's treated? So it's all going to be removing about 2.5 to almost 3 times the amount of contaminant mass as the base alternative. Now for alternative 3, again, we're giving ourselves a 15-year time frame to get the permits, planning, construction all completed, and get this thing in operation. So this is over 15 years, not 20 years. You're actually getting quite a bit of removal. You're getting almost as much as you would for the base alternative here. So what that shows is that it's kind of law of diminishing returns. Over the first 15 years, you're getting about 80% of the total mass removed out of the system. But in terms of cleanup, again, it's the smallest amount of PCB removed for the 3 alternatives. In terms of cleanup time for the alternative 2 is about 9 years faster than the base alternative. And you do not reach cleanup time because it's more than 15 years, okay, for alternative 3. So when you're going from that conversion from groundwater to surface water, you're going to be leaving contamination in place, okay? But again, it's like, okay, well, that's fine because we have surface water. We don't need the groundwater to use the groundwater anymore. We're going to be relying on surface water. So, with Nick's question as far as alternative 2, option 1, that seems to be the road that we're heading down as far as for the recommended alternative. The 3 big items on the horizon that we'll need to focus a lot more energy on, and hopefully we'll get John quite a bit involved in the discussions with Tyler Keys and Lucan Brothers, have to do with ownership, long-term O&M, and then excess water and purchase water agreements. So under ownership, most of the benefits from this alternative would be gained by Lucan Brothers Water Company. Now, Lucan Brothers Water Company is regarded as a disadvantaged community. And there are some advantages to being a disadvantaged community. One of those advantages is that in terms of state funding, The match requirement for a DAC ranges from about 5 to 10%. And again, most of the benefits go to that community. And I think we could clearly show that with alternative to option 1. Now, if the applicant is not a DAC, so if the district were to take the lead on the application, the match requirement would increase to about 20% of total project costs. So that's a significant savings. Long-term O&M, when the owner is identified and who would take the lead in the application, there are going to need to be arrangements made, negotiated as far as who's going to take responsibilities for the long-term O&M of the new infrastructure that may be installed as part of alternative 2. So that would be a replacement well along with a well and treatment system. Potential options could be, the easiest, it would be Lucan Brothers Crews that would be responsible for this. It may be a combination of Lucan Brothers Crews, district, and Otago Keys Crews, or some district maybe providing some type of engineering supporting role if they wanted that. But those are the types of things that will need to be talked about over the next 6 months. And another option is just totally farm it out and pay consulting engineers and subcontractors to operate that system over the next 20 years. As far as excess water and purchase water agreements, during the off-season, so during the current months, winter months, there is very little off-season demand in Lucan Brothers, through the Lucan Brothers water system. So in order to better optimize groundwater remediation, it would be beneficial for the district and Tahoe Keys to enter into some type of water purchase agreement to take up some of that excess water and use it within our water systems to somewhat support more effective PCB removal and pollution control under that option. So that's what's kind of coming down the road. And John?
Could you review the schedule for the board? It sounds like it's going to be in about 6+ months. You'll come back to the board and be talking about.
Well, it's probably going to be less than that.
Okay.
The project completion date is June 30th, 2020. So that's everything's wrapped up. I think over the next 3 months, we're going to be working on these issues. I anticipate getting a draft of the feasibility study by the end of January. And then at that point, I anticipate that there will be a public meeting. We're going to roll this out to the public, ask for feedback and input on these 3 alternatives, and then to get to the last stage would be the recommendation for that interim recommended alternative at the very end of this process. So,
one more question. Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
And I was just looking at the cleanup time between alternative 1 and alternative 2, 27 years versus 18 years.
Right.
Are you able to and I'm looking at the cost. So could you talk about kind of the comparing the 27 and 18 years on the cost? What kind of risk would the community be looking at if we went with alternative 1 and it took another 10 years to clean up that plume?
Under alternative 1, what happens is that you're going to see, much higher levels of contamination in the Tahoe Keys number 2 well and in the number 1. Okay. In terms of the results of the modeling, the good news is that you don't see contamination occurring and the Lucan Brothers Water Company #1 well or the Tahoe Keys #3 well. But again, levels of contamination are going to creep up in the two Tahoe Keys wells. That's going to put Tahoe Keys in a very difficult position, because essentially their entire, the majority of their water system is going to be encompassed or be included within the area. So they're going to have to look outside their water system for alternative sources of water, or they're going to have to, put treatment on the #1 well. Another thing to think about with the #1 well is the oldest well in their system. It's over 50 years old. Okay, they're not. I don't believe that they're very motivated to do something with that existing well, given that it's 50 years old. I think they're going to. I mean, it's my belief that they would probably just abandon that well, replace it, drill another one. So there's an added cost on that, and with what we're treating. So I suspect that's probably what's going to happen.
Okay. So is this right? The base alternative, it has zero, but it's likely to have additional substantial costs for time.
There are consequences to not doing anything. Okay. And I think the last time that we spoke about it, the ultimate cost to the district would be if Lucan Brothers and Tahoe Keys decides that we can't cope with this problem anymore, and we're just going to fold our tent and say, hey, district, you help us out and take us over, and it lands in our lap. So that's that's the downside of alternative one.
Thanks.
Okay, so some more good news. I don't know, good news or not, but this is, I don't know how well you can see this on the slide, but the map on the left, those are the current, those were the results of all the drilling that was done over 2019 by AD-HOC for the regional board as part of this regional plume characterization. If you take a look at the blue line, so here's the blue line. See, it looks like a big U shape, and it's open at the top. And being that it's open at the top, it's not a good thing. Okay, that means that the northern extent of the plume has not been defined by the investigation. It's still open. Okay, and we know that there is contamination. Here's the #1 well, Tahoe Keys #1. Here's the Tahoe Keys #2. Tahoe Keys #3 is out over here. Fortunately, the drilling that they did showed that there's non-detect out to this area from the plume, so it looks again that's pretty safe. With Tahoe Keys or Lucan Brothers #1, this is the location of the well here. They did find trace levels of contamination about a quarter of a mile to the east of that Lucan Brothers #1 well. And there are concentrations above drinking water standards, again, maybe about a half mile, less than a half mile to the east of it. So it looks like where they found the contamination and where the well is pumping from are from the same portions of the aquifer. So it's very possible that reliance on the Lucan Brothers #1 could be exasperating the situation by actually pulling in contamination into that well. So what the consultants for what AD-HOC is doing for the regional board is they're putting all this, they're compiling all this data, and they're putting it into this model that you see here that shows the plume. You can see the extent of the plume is a little over a mile long, and it goes down to a depth of it's about 180 to 200 feet deep at its deepest point. What we're looking at with alternative 2, option 1, is putting in that replacement well over in the area of where Sonic 3 is. And that would act to somewhat cut off the plume in that area. And, but again, the hottest levels are, in the South Y area. And what we would do, regardless, is try to use this information to pressure Manhattan to get the responsible parties to start moving on remitted contamination from the source area, because ultimately that will be the biggest benefit to all of our drinking water problems in that area. So that's what's happening.
I'm just looking at these maps. You say Sonic 1 is at the Y?
Yes.
Then you've got some that looks like it's going on gradient.
Well, it's actually, can you see there's a little compass right here that shows the orientation of that line?
Of the line
section?
Okay.
Yeah, so to the right is to the north, to the left is south.
Yes.
And you can see a plan view on the top of the...
But I'm going back to down below, where Sonic 1, and then you got some red in there.
Right.
Which is,
right. So those are concentrations that are in thousands of parts per billion.
but you also have some that are sort of upgrading.
Correct.
Could that be where the three automobile agencies were? Are they contributing anything, or are they still assuming that everything's coming from the...
Right. You're looking at a picture of the contaminant plume of a 30 plus year contaminant plume.
40 plus. They knew about it 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Their staff did.
Yeah. So that's what you're looking at. So, then there are other complicating factors as far as what was the influence of the city storm drain system with, it looks like the contamination, a large part of the high contamination is associated with the Tucker Avenue stormwater basin, the city's Tucker Avenue basin, and so it could very well be that there may have been contamination that entered into that system that was captured in that basin, and that basin is continually infiltrating the contamination into the groundwater system, okay, as it's being used as a stormwater basin. So one of the recommended actions that we're going to propose as part of the feasibility study as additional actions is, to correct that problem. And the city needs its stormwater system, but it needs it in a manner where it's also not contributing to this groundwater contamination.
So what would you recommend they do?
Probably the easiest way, well, the best way would be just to go in there and over excavate, pull that contamination out. If that can't be done, put in a hard pipe which can bypass the water, whenever the water comes through that system, so it isn't infiltrated into the area where there are high levels of contamination in the shallow soils.
One more thing, we've had some concerns about possibly this contamination getting to Sunset Well, the Davie Well, and we're looking to hopefully have Manhattan install some sentinel wells in between the plume and those wells.
Right.
To check that out, so there's a lot of open questions. Just wondering if you could comment on where we're at with that.
Okay, as far as sentinel wells, Manhattan's made it clear that they don't have that they're not going to have sufficient funds to put sentinel wells at all of the neighboring potentially threatened water supply wells. So they want us to prioritize. So in terms of prioritization, we're at the bottom of the list. Okay, we're furthest away. Okay, even in it, you could make an argument, well, maybe furthest away, but it produces, 5-6 times as much water as any of the other, neighboring wells.
So Lucan's one, Key's one, those may be higher.
Yeah, well, Lucan's number one, Tawakee's number three would probably have the highest priorities for sentinel wells. To monitor movement of the ones already in the space. But there are other sources of funding to the district that we could get as a groundwater sustainability agency in terms of technical support. We can, there are, through the Department of Water Resources, there's funding available that we could try to tap to get funding to install, we'll call it a monitoring well for that application, but we'll use it as a sentinel well. And so, I need to talk to Lynn a little bit more about that, but again, I think there are other ways that we could fund that. And as far as state funding goes, I think most of that is going to be directed towards public use for local village.
Thanks.
Do you have better copies of what we can see here?
I'd be glad to provide a bigger copy.
Do you have them now?
No, I mean, I put it out. Well, I could give you the full page slides, but I mean, I could, if you want copies of the actual, any actual figures in here, I could also give those to you at a later.
Do you have these in your office? Is that what-
Yeah, I'm sure I do.
Everything else is.
I just want to look at it because it's, can't read some of these numbers.
Yeah, I think, again, after Lahontan completes their report, I actually will have the final model, and you can put it on the model, you can spin it around, and it's a three-dimensional model, and you can take a look at the final results and close up detail with the
So you could go through.
Correct, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And give it.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Which closed session items were in regards to the consent items? So,